discussing SBM deployment and setup. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first are the installation requirements. Okay, now obviously SBM is a program that's going to run on its own. We integrate with multiple accounting packages, but today we're focused on ACPAC. So we no longer run under ACPAC System Manager. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is installing MISys on a server machine as well as each of the clients. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first is on the server. Okay, now before you get going with any of new installs, the first thing you're going to want to do is review our installation guide. Okay, you can get a link for that, and it can be downloaded from our website by contacting our sales department, okay, or Scott Beavers. Now, that installation guide walks you through the setup and configuration on the server as well as the clients, okay, and it gives you a very straightforward walkthrough, and it should be pretty straightforward in getting it configured. Now, there are some differences with MISys SBM, okay? The first is MISys SBM uses Internet Information Services, okay? And in particular, the clients are going to use IIS, or Internet Information Services, to access MISys on the server and then connect to the database via a website that gets set up during the install on your server machine. Okay, so the first thing I brought up here is Internet Information Services. Okay, now this is obviously on my machine. However, if I open this up, okay, under Websites, we configure a website under Default Website. Okay, I have some older versions here, but this one's called SBM Web Service 40. Okay, and that's a website that all of the clients are going to use to connect to the server and then get to the database. Okay. Now, another thing is, what you're going to find is when you run this install, okay, you have the option to install the server programs. Okay. The server programs can only be installed on one machine. Okay. So when you set this up, you're going to have to pick a machine that is going to serve as the server box for that site. Okay. Now, we'll run on pretty much all the standard operating systems, but the key thing is, since it uses IIS, okay, you're not going to be able to configure a server, for instance, on any of the home operating systems, like, for instance, XP Home, okay, because you need to have IIS running. Okay. All right, so let's say you've downloaded the application or the install and you're ready to set this up. Okay, the first thing you want to do is turn off antivirus. Okay, no antivirus running. Any other applications that are running in the system tray or in the background should be turned off, okay, or closed. Make sure you're logged in as the administrator before you run the install. Okay. Now, when you get to the installation, there are a number of different standard screens, okay? You're going to come to a screen that offers you three options, okay? A single user, single PC, a complete install, or a custom installation, okay? Now, I'm not bringing up the install here because I already have it configured. However, the single user, single PC, if you want to download a sample set of the program so that you can configure it on your laptop and take a look at MISys SBM, you could choose single user, single PC. The key difference with that one as compared to the complete multi-user install option is that single user, single PC doesn't use and won't configure a website under IIS, okay, because it's all going to be running locally off your machine. So when you choose single user, single PC, it's all going to be running right off your machine. All right? When you're setting this up for a client, you're going to want to choose complete multi-user, okay, if you want to use our default database engine, SQL Express, right? If you want to just accept all the default options, you can choose the complete multi-user, and it'll just blow through and set everything up for you right off the install, okay? If you want to pick and choose different options, change the installation path, or if you have your own version of SQL, okay, you can use the custom option, okay, to change the install path and or point to your own instance of SQL that you've got set up, okay, and then we'll configure a database in your instance of SQL, okay? All right, but for people that don't have their own version of SQL and they want to just use our default SQL Express version, that's what they would use, okay? So we get a question every now and again as to, you know, is there an advantage to having the full version of SQL? Can I just use the SQL Express that we provide with our install? There are some advantages, obviously, to having the full version of SQL. So, you know, if that client is looking for the ability to automate their backup cycle, to be able to tweak the performance with some of the settings in the full version of SQL, or monitor the access to the database, things like that, sure, they would want to go with the full version of SQL. If that's not an option, they don't have the full version, like I said, we do provide the default SQL Express install when you install MISys. Just use that complete multi-user, okay? Now, the custom option, along with allowing you to change the installation path and point to your own default database or your own full version of SQL, gives you the ability to pick and choose which applications you're going to install on this machine, okay? You're going to have the ability to install an admin console, the client, the full server, and also SQL Express, okay? And those are all just radio buttons, okay? Again, the installation guide will walk you all through that, okay? All right, so once you've got the install done, you're going to have, and we'll just talk for the purposes of this demonstration, let's say you did a full, complete install, okay, or a single user, single PC install, all right? The first login you're going to bring up is the server administration login, and it looks just like this, okay? Now, by default, the password here is password, all lowercase. That's what it will be right after you're done installing it, okay? If I were to log in, I could just type in password, all lowercase, and then click login, okay? And that would open up the server administration, okay? Now, on a live install, if you were installing this for a client, okay, our suggestion is you want to test the connection to IIS. Okay, now obviously Internet Information Services, we're configuring a website on their server. Okay, so is it possible that there could be some issues with how it was set up or configured based on the security that's in place in that particular environment? Sure, that's always a possibility. So the first step you really want to take here is to click on Edit, go to Server Connection, okay, and you're going to be given two options. The first is Single User, Single PC, okay? Now, if I select that, okay, I'm going to be able to log in to the server administration, okay, without using IIS, okay, because it's all running locally on this server machine, okay? I would suggest selecting Internet or Intranet because what this does, it's going to test out IIS on this server machine to make sure we're communicating properly, okay? That's a very solid first step in configuring a client to make sure you're accessing the database through the website properly, okay? Now, by default, it's going to say localhost. It's going to then point to SPM Web Service 40, miwebservice.asmx, okay? This is directly pointing to Internet Information Services that we looked at, okay? We're on the local PC PC, right? So that's where we install the server. So under websites, default website, SPM Web Service 40. Okay, there it is right there. Okay, and then it's hitting miwebservice.asmx. Okay, so just leave this. This will be what it defaults to. Leave it as is. Okay, and then try logging in. Okay, so again, we're going to go password, all lowercase. Okay, and then we get to the server administration console. All right. Now, the first thing you want to do when you come into the server administration, okay, is go to the licenses tab. All right. Now, yours is going to be empty off the fresh install. So the first thing you're going to want to do is enter in your serial number. Okay. You'll be provided this by the sales department. If it's a client that we're working with, the client will have their serial number. They'll enter this in there. Okay. You're then going to hit Tab and click the Save button. Okay? Now, you don't jump to update from MISys or apply to all these companies. You don't do any of that. The very next step you're going to take here is to go to the Owner tab and then click Activate. Okay? Now, when you activate, what we're going to do, or what will happen is, behind the scenes, we're going to update our servers, okay, with the MAC address of the NIC on that server machine. Okay, and that gets back to what I talked about a little bit earlier. You can only have the server installed on one machine. Okay, so that will update the MAC address. We'll register this. It will then update and populate all this information based on what they've set up with us from our servers. Okay, so you'd have company name, Tesco, and you'd have all this address information already filled in and updated when you click that Activate button. You'll get a prompt that comes up telling you that the activation was successful, and you're then ready to move on to the next stage. Okay, that's going to be going back to the Licenses tab. Okay, so from here, what you would do is click Update from MISys. Okay, the update will go and connect to our server, and it's going to upload the licenses that that client has purchased. Okay, and you'll see licenses similar to this updated on the Licenses tab. Okay. Now, the Apply to All Companies button and the Import License File are there for specific circumstances. For instance, if along the way, let's say a client wants to add some users, right? There are no more activation codes, okay, in SPM. It's a big difference from SAE. Okay, all the licenses get updated from this tab. Okay, so you could update from MISys, apply to all companies, and that will bring in any new licenses that the client may have purchased along the way, and then apply them to the companies, okay, that they've purchased. Okay, it's a big difference. No more activation codes. Activation codes won't, you know, for those of you who've run into times where those codes that get reset, that's all gone now. Okay, the licenses get updated here, right, automatically. Just click that button, and we go and get them. Okay, so once you've got your licenses, now we're going to go to the Companies tab. Okay, now on the Companies tab, you're always going to have SPM Samco. Okay, SPM Samco is our sample company. Okay, and that's always going to be there. You can delete it, you can recreate it as much as you want. Okay, to play around with it, and that's got a lot of the standard items that you'll know or have seen from SAE. You know, we've got the I-50, I-01s. It comes with default serial lot items as well as some with routing. Okay, but the sample company is always going to be there. Okay, in a live environment, you're going to want to now at this point set up or create the client's new company. Okay. So what we'll do is click on New, okay, and you're going to see a listing based on the licenses you brought in of all the company databases that are available to you. Okay, now I have quite a few. We'll work with Doug 1. Okay, you click OK. Now, in a live situation, they would get all this information based on what they had registered with us. Okay, so it would be very similar to the Owners tab in that they'd have all this information filled in. You can also edit it as needed. Okay, and then you would select your home currency. Okay, from this form. That's very important. You can't change it after the fact. Okay, so if you forget to choose this, you'd have to delete the company and recreate it. Okay, so make sure that when you get to this part, you select your home currency. Okay, now for those of you who are going to have test databases, or if they have a test database, okay, you could create with sample data. Okay, and that would load up the same stuff that's in SBM Samco. All right, but in our case, we're going to create an empty one, so we'll just say create. Okay, this goes through the entire process of creating the database, okay, and all the tables that are needed. Okay, we've now got a new company created, and there it is. All right, now that's at creation time. Okay, this is also the tab you're going to go to, okay, as they start processing in MISys. Okay, this is where they're going to go to take backups if needed to restore the database. Okay, and that's what these buttons are here for. Okay, so new we talked about. That's going to allow them to create new companies based on licenses that they've purchased from MISys. Okay, delete would obviously allow them to highlight and delete one of their company databases. Okay, we also have a backup button here. Okay, clicking backup will take a SQL backup of the company database. Okay, so if I click backup on Doug 1, I get a prompt telling me it's successful, and I click OK. All right. In the past, a lot of us use dbdump, dbload to facilitate backups. Of course, some of us take backups off the database. That's fine too. There's no more dbdump, dbload. You can take a backup from here. Okay. You can also restore from here. So I just took a backup. Now, obviously, you're going to want to establish systems for clients where they would come in here on a regular basis and take backups of their data. Okay? If they had to restore, okay, by clicking the restore button, we give you a listing of all the previous backups that were taken from this company along with the dates and times, so that you could go and grab the most current one and restore right over top of it. Okay? It's a pretty quick process. Okay? Very user-friendly. Gives you the choices that you'd like to make. Okay? Now, how do we know where those backups are? Okay? On the System tab, okay, and we'll visit this in just a moment, you have the ability to designate a backup directory for your MISys databases. Okay, and this is the folder that MISys is going to put those backups into, okay, whenever you click the backup button from the Companies tab. Okay, now along with that, as we're going to see in some of the next few sessions, there are multiple processes that you could hit in MISys that are going to prompt you, hey, do you want to take a backup? Things like period end, physical inventory postings, housekeeping functions, they all prompt you, do you want to take a backup of the database? If you click yes or the client clicks yes, we go out and automatically take a backup of that company and throw it into this backup directory. Okay? Does it have to be here? No. This would be just the default folder. You could create a folder up on the server called MISys Backup, right? And then you'd know right where they are, and they can go into that folder too. Okay, that's fine. All right? That's how this restore button, though, knows where to get that list to show you where those backups are. Okay? Now, if you have the need to take a backup of your company and you want to designate a specific folder, you click Backup As. Okay? Clicking Backup As gives you the ability to go in and specify a particular folder that you want to put your backup into. Okay? So you can browse around and save it wherever you want. Okay? So backup goes to the system directory. Backup As, you just browse to where you want to put it. Okay? Same with Restore From. Okay? Restore From gives you the ability to browse to a backup that you might have somewhere else on your network and load that one. Okay? All right, so many of you are familiar with, in SAE, when a user gets kicked out of MISys, or they've had the occasion where they get an error that makes it so that they can't log out of MISys properly, they have to go in and reset the mi5xunit.ism file from the site folder, right? Because the user gets locked in. Maybe they haven't quite hit their max users, but a couple of users have been forced to use the task manager to close MISys. We have to go to that site folder, delete that file to reset the login. Okay? That's gone now. Okay? If you ever had the occasion where a user was locked up in such a way that they couldn't reset their user, and I'm going to show you, we actually have an easier way to do this, but if you ever got the occasion where some users were locked in, you come right into the Companies tab, click Reset User, and you would see the user listed here, and you reset them. Okay? And that resets the users, and they're able to log in. Okay? We also have this button on the actual login forms for both server administration as well as the SBM client. Okay? So it's very rare that you would have to come here and do this, but this does give you the ability to reset the users. Okay? Now, as you start getting upgrades, okay, let's say we come out with MISys SBM 5.0, right, next month or a couple months from now, whatever. You have the ability here to convert databases. Okay, so if you install our new version on the same machine, we detect the previous iteration of that company, okay, and the previous version. And it is literally, well, actually, during the install, we'll prompt you, hey, do you want to convert the database? And you could say yes, and it would happen during the install. That's just the way our installs work now. However, if you chose no and said you didn't want to convert during the install, you could come in here into your new server administration and click on the Convert Database button. Okay, I happen to have some old databases here. I could select one and convert it, right? And it would automatically convert that database up to whatever version I'm at. Okay, so that's what that Convert Database detects, the old versions of the database, and then automatically upgrades them for you, okay, from that Convert Database. Okay, and we then see a company listed here. We'd be good to go in the new version. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the System tab real quick. The System tab gives you the ability to change the admin password. Okay. Now, obviously, we have an admin user for the companies. Okay. However, this is specifically referring to the login we used when we launched the server administration. Okay, by default, it's password. You can change that here. Okay, if you change it, make sure you make note of it. Okay, because there's no easy way to reset the admin password if you change it here and it gets lost. Okay, so make sure if you're going to change that, you make note of it somewhere secure. Okay. Down here, if you had the need to change some of the database connection parameters, you could do that here. I wouldn't suggest it unless you had a specific reason for it. The key thing you would want to change if you wanted to change anything here would actually be the backup directory. A lot of times people will make a specific folder that they would then use as their backup directory, so you can do that here. Okay? Now, there's another button here called Get Program Updates. Okay? We no longer have service packs like you download for MISys SAE. Okay? You download it, you run it. What happens now is when we release new updates, you can come to the System tab here, click on Get Program Updates, and it will actually go out and download any available update that's out there. And it will then prompt you and automatically update the server for you. Okay, you'll get a series of prompts. We've got the status meter that's going to run across the screen, and it's going to update that server for you. Now here's the cool part. All the clients, the very next time they log into the server, are going to automatically get updated with the new update the server just applied. Okay, so the very next time Susie out on her workstation logs into MISys, it's going to say, hey, there's a new update on the server. Do you want to apply it? She clicks yes, and it updates her client to be running the new stuff, okay, the new fixes that we released. Okay, and that happens for every single client the very next time they log in. Okay. Now, this SBM server on the PC, I talked about the installation options a little bit. If you choose custom from a client machine, one of the things you have the ability to do is install the SBM Server Administration Console. Okay? Now, that doesn't give you the ability to hit all of these functions we just talked about. However, it does give you the ability to access some of them. Okay? So, for instance, you would deselect this, okay, if you're running in the console from a client machine because you don't have access to all these functions. If you didn't, you would find if you tried to do some of these things, it wouldn't let you. Okay? So deselect that checkbox, and we're going to make inactive any of the stuff you don't have access to. Okay? So for instance, if we go to the Companies tab, the only thing I can do is use the default backup and restore buttons. Okay? You can't back up as or restore from. Okay? From a client PC. Okay? That's just an example. But what that does is it makes inactive any of the stuff you wouldn't be able to do from your client PC. Okay? All right, so the Currency tab is really just a place where you would add in any currencies that you would want for your company. However, you have the ability to enter these in the actual database once you get to that point. Okay, so it's not necessary to do it here. But, for instance, if I was a Canadian company, I might want to throw in CAD, right, and configure that. You know what I'm saying? So we might want to do that ahead of time. If you didn't, as long as you create your company with the correct functional currency, if you had some source currencies that the suppliers are going to be used, you can get that at the company level. Okay? You can get that at the company level. All right? Okay, so that's the server administration function. Okay? All right, so you configure your server. All right, it's all set. You create your company. All right, you're now ready to install the clients on some client PCs. All right? You use the same install that you used on the server on the client PCs. Okay? There is no workstation setup anymore. Okay? But what there is a client install. All right? And that's going to create an icon that looks similar to this. Okay? A MISys SBM 4.0 client. Okay? Now, every client PC that's going to be connecting to MISys has to have the client installed on it. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is refer back to that installation documentation, okay, because that walks you through the client installs as well. But like I said, you copy that install file to the client PCs, you run it, okay? When you get to the installation options, you're going to choose custom, okay? The custom is then going to give you the ability to choose via radio buttons what you want to install on that client machine. Okay? So if it was just a base client, you could choose SBM client, and that would install the client programs on that PC. Okay? If you wanted them to have the server administration console, you could also choose the server admin console. And that would give them the same set of icons that I have here, this guy and this guy, all right? But what you'd have to remember is that checkbox when they go into server admin console, okay, to make sure that they're not trying to hit functions they don't have access to. All right? So we install the client on that client workstation. All right? What do I have to do to get it to connect to the server that I just configured? Okay, well, I'm going to show you. All you need to do is click Edit, Server Connection, okay, and you're going to see three options here, okay? Single user, single PC is not the one you want, not in a client-server environment, because this says what? Okay, this says I'm looking for the database on this machine, okay? We set it up on the server. So what you want to use is internet or intranet connection. Okay, while this says local area network, this is really if it's easier for you to browse and you've configured your IIS website to be seen over the LAN, you could use that. But to avoid any confusion, select internet or intranet. Okay? By default, it's going to show you the same URL you had on the server. It's going to say localhost SBM Web Service 40. All you need to do is replace the localhost part of this URL with the server name, okay? Now, if you forget what the server name or you're walking a client through this and they forget what the server name is, have them go into Internet Information Services on their server, and whatever it's called is going to be listed right here. That's the machine name they want to use in this URL, okay? So mine's TS1, and I click OK. Obviously, I could use localhost, but in a client environment, I put the server in here. The rest of this stays the same. Click OK, and I'm ready to log in. That's it. So literally, it's edit, server connection, internet or intranet connection, change the localhost part of the URL to say the server name. Okay, leave the rest of it the same. Click OK. All right. Now, you may have to put your company in to the company field. Okay. The default user and password is going to be user ID admin. Okay. Password's going to be password, all lowercase. Okay. And you can click login to log in. Okay. It's going to go out to the server, see that internet connection, connect to or that website, and then it's going to connect to the database. Okay? So let's talk about that. We've talked about a local area network here, right? So it's a LAN. We're not going out over the internet. We're going to the intranet. So we're just going up to the server, hitting that URL that's on the server, connecting to the database. Okay? Now, let's talk about internet connections. Okay? Could you just plug that URL in from home from a laptop, right? Well, we've seen here, if I go to this website, I'm able to log into the database. Can I just install the client at home on my PC at home and just configure this URL and log in? Not by default, okay? You have to make it so that this URL is visible over the internet to be able to do that, okay? In which case you'd want to look into how you would have to do that and take the proper security to make sure that only specific people had access to that, right? The other way you could do that, but as long as a PC, and this is really the key point, as long as a PC has visibility to this URL, they sure could. They could install the client, put this URL in, and as long as they have access to that, they could log in and access the database from home. Okay? The other way they could do that is through something like VPN, right? They connect in. As long as they have visibility to this URL, that's the key point. Okay? Then they can connect to the database just like any other client that's running locally. All right? Okay. So before we get to the company, there are a couple of other buttons here as well that are worth talking about here. Okay? Check for updates. If I click check for updates from a client and anything's available, it would have told me, hey, there's an update available. Go to the server and update it. And then I might let the IT person know there's an update out there. Okay? I'm current, so there's no problem. The request support button is obviously there to request support. You can click that to issue a support request. Now, the reset user, we talked a little bit about that .ism file. Some of you, I'm sure, have had to delete to reset the login in SAE. If a user happens to have had an irregular exit from MISys, say they were processing something, hit an error, had the machine lock up, the power goes out, whatever, the next time they log in, if their user is locked into the system, this button's going to be active. And literally, when they tried to log in, it would say user already logged in. We've all seen that message before, right? But this button would be active. They click it, and then 9 times out of 10, they're going to be able to log in. Okay? It is that easy. If this button's active, it means you're locked in the system. Click it, and then log right in. Okay? So let's log in and take a look. Okay, so we're going to discuss the functionality in the next session. However, what I'd like to talk about here is the administration options. Okay, now right now we've got a bare bones empty company. Okay, so if we go into the administration function, okay, let's talk about these settings here. Okay, now the company profile on the live system, you're going to see all of this filled in. Okay, based on all that owner information, right? Because we filled this company section up when we created the new database. All right. However, you could change any of this information here. So if they forgot to enter something, don't worry about it. That's fine. Okay. I did want to touch on though this info center URL field. Okay. Now you'll notice when we first logged in, what did we see? We saw this here, right? That's the default image any new company's going to have. Okay, that's just a default. You can plug a website in here, though, okay, and have it displayed upon login. So, for example, if I go back to company profile, okay, and I go to the dashboard alerts, now I've got the MISys homepage on there, right? And the same would be true for any of your sites. Okay, you just plug their website in, and that becomes their starting page, right? Or what have you, okay? All right, so let's go back here. All right, so users. No longer are we creating users in ACPAC, okay? The users are now MISys specific. So in here is where you would create the users. Okay, for each user that's going to be logging into MISys and processing. Okay, we have admin in here. If you're going to click a new user or create a new user, click new up top. Okay, give it a user ID, username, and then a password. Okay, now one of the things you want to select here is a security group ID. Okay, your security groups now are defined in MISys. Okay, we're not defining them in System Manager anymore. Okay, so we've created our user, assigned them to a group ID. That user can now log in from their PC. Okay. Now, the number of users you can create are not directly related to the number of user licenses you have purchased. So, for example, you could have purchased 5 user licenses. Okay. You could create 10 users. That just means you can only have 5 users logged in at any given time. Okay, but you can create as many user IDs as you like. Okay. All right, so the security groups are very similar, okay, from a settings perspective to what you've seen over in ACPAC. Okay, so in here, you've got a set all button if you wanted to start with everything selected. Okay, you can just select and deselect, okay, settings as needed. Okay, so if you had users you only wanted to have view access, go down through, clear out that modify checkbox so that they had view selected, and then you could assign those users to that group. Okay, All right? It's pretty self-explanatory. The Members tab, okay, this will show you any members that are currently associated with this security group. Shortcuts allows you to define shortcuts, okay, for this specific user group, okay? So you can choose any of the functions that they have access to based on the permissions you defined, okay, in here, and that will go into a shortcuts menu, which is located down here. Here, I'll stretch this out. Down here in this lower left-hand panel, okay? So when that user assigned to that group logs in, they could go to the shortcuts and have access to those functions you set up for them in the security group, okay? Now the menu allows you to specifically designate what's available when they click under any of these menu selections, okay? So by default, they get access to whatever they have access to based on their security. But you can tweak this to customize what's available under each of those menu selections, okay? All right. Okay, the production calendar, many of you are already familiar with this. It looks very similar to what it looked like in SAE. However, okay, you can now define holidays off the production calendar. Okay, and we won't plan any production, okay, on those days based on what you add in here for holidays. Okay, so that means we're talking work orders, manufacturing orders. We actually now have visibility to those, okay? It's not just driven specifically by scheduling, okay? All right, production shifts is shop floor control. We'll talk about that later on, okay? Company options. All right, wanted to talk about this real quick. Many of these options are the same, okay? You'll be familiar with much of this. On the Preferences tab, though, what I wanted to note here is the costing methods. Okay, these selections are basically all the same. The costing methods now, MISys SBM gives you the ability to use LIFO and FIFO costing. Okay, so in particular, what that means, that gets you real close. Everybody uses the term actual costing. This gets you very close to that. And literally what will happen is, if you choose LIFO or FIFO, as you receive quantities in at a new cost, MISys creates cost buckets, and we'll keep track of those quantities that were received in at that cost, and then as those quantities are used, you'll go to the next available bucket based on a FIFO or LIFO method. Okay? So that means when you build things, when you're receiving things in, we're keeping track of what cost they come in at, and therefore what costs are going to get used at. Okay? So that gets you real close to that actual costing. Okay, so LIFO or FIFO can now drive the accounting in SBM. All right. Auto increment, much the same. Formats, this is all pretty much the same. You're defining formats, item reference, pick, and so on. Your decimal precision is down here. Again, you can go out to 6 places. Okay, that's the same as SAE. Now the display, as you're going to see in some of these later sessions, the menus will display, for instance, master files items will show you the first 25 items because that's the records per page. We then have next and previous arrows to allow you to cycle through the next group. You can set this out to 9,999 so that you're showing everything. And then you're scrolling up and down rather than jumping to the next page. Okay? Just keep in mind this affects load time as we have to retrieve all those records from the database. So bear that in mind when you set this one up. Okay? Now the accounting tab is where you're going to designate the accounting system that they're using. Okay? Now obviously, like I said, we use other accounting modules. This focus is ACPAC. So you select ACPAC. Okay? As long as they can log in to ACPAC on this machine, you'll be able to select the database you want to log into, okay, that you're going to be using for MISys, okay? So you would select the database ID, okay, and again, if you have multiples, you'll see them available in that drop-down, okay? Select the integration you're going to be using, Okay, this is all similar to the way it's configured in SAE. Enter a vendor ID, call it MISys SBM typically, unless you have a reason to use something else. And then give the user and password we're going to use when we have to access the database. Okay, now I've used admin. All right, so we enter that in, click Save. Okay, and we're all set. Okay, control accounts is the default account set you're all familiar with for MacPack or MISys SAE. Okay, we're going to define those controls to reference whatever account you want. Okay, and then email is much the same as it is in SAE as well. Okay, now we've just created a base empty database. Okay, right now, and then what we'll talk about in the next session is some of the import functionality that's available if you're going to bring data in from some outside database. However, okay, if you bring an existing SAE client to SBM, we actually have a function that's available to convert the data from MISys SAE. Okay? It'll bring everything in from their MISys SAE database into SBM. Okay? All right, so I click OK. It's going to run through, do its thing. And again, I'm just using sample data, so you'd give yourself some time there. But it would blow down through, bring all my items, bombs, suppliers, purchase orders, MOs, all that, from SAE into SBM. Okay. Now, I know there's a lot there. Again, we just wanted to touch base here, get things going, get you familiar with the deployment and the setup options. Okay. So as this is going, this is really the last thing I wanted to cover in this first session. So what we'll do now is open up to any questions. Like I said, the way these will work is we'll try to get all the information for that session into, half hour, 45 minutes, and then leave the rest for questions. So if you have any questions here, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll unmute you, and we'll kind of go from there. Otherwise, if you don't, we'll see you on Friday for the next session, where we're going to be talking about all the basic operations and the new functionality that's available in SBM, again, with that focus being on what's changed from SAE. Okay, so thanks for attending, and we'll open it up to questions. Hello, Karen? Hello, Karen? Did you have a question, Karen? No? Okay. Dana and Joe, you will have to, Dana Stidson and Joe Mosieri, you'd have to enable your audio pin for me to be able to field your questions, because I can't unmute you, unfortunately. Sorry. Let's see. Let's go to Pat. Did you have a question? Or Peter? I'm sorry. Peter Kreese?
Doug, this is Dave Brown. We've got a question from Etienne. Can you hear me?
I can.
He says activation is tied to a MAC address. What if the hardware or server changes? That's a good question.
It is a good question. And the way that works is, and it does come up from time to time, as you change servers, what you do is contact support first, because we have a set of steps that will walk you through that that process step by step, phase by phase. One of those phases is, though, you would contact sales once you've installed it on that new server, and we will reset that key for you so that once you get to the new server, you'll be able to activate it and update it to that new NIC. Very good question,
though. Got a question here from, looks like Sonia. Does conversion include all history as well?
It does. And you actually have the ability, when you do that conversion from SAE, it says include log records after a given date. So you actually specify what date you're going to include those records from, and it will bring that history in, sure. Yep.
Okay. And how can we run with multiple currencies, Joe asks?
Okay, we're going to cover that in the basic operations. However, we actually have now our own currency database, okay, where you enter your own currency codes, and you can actually even bring them in from ACPAC with the associated information. And then you attach them to suppliers much the same as you would do in SAE.
And here's a question from Jamie. When will they be posted and where? Since I have no idea what they is, I can't tell you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. When would which be posted?
Okay. Let's see. The licenses, this is a non-English speaker, so bear with me. Licenses depending on number of databases or company. Well, yeah, the issue of companies versus databases, Doug. You know the answer to that.
Sure. Okay, that's a very good question. In SAE, ACPAC obviously allows you to create any number of databases that you want. Okay. In SBM, you only get the databases that you purchase, as well as SBM SAMCO. SAMCO is always there. However, you only get, let's say you only bought one database. That is the only database you can create, and therefore that would be where your licenses are applied to. Okay? If you needed extra databases, you would have to actually purchase those.
Okay. And Dave Simpson wants to know, can the accounting database be different from SBM? Can we have pervasive in one and SQL in the other?
Yes. Yes, you can. If that question is, can ACPAC be pervasive while MISys is running SQL, yes, that's fine.
Okay. Does this mean that FAE is no longer available for sale? I'll answer that myself. If you said that, I don't know when you said it. No, this doesn't mean that at all. It's just that I hope you're getting the idea that there's some really cool stuff in SBM, and SBM does virtually everything that SAE does, with very few exceptions.
That's correct. Yes.
Is SQL 2008 supported? Dana Stinson asks. Doug?
Yes, we do. It hasn't been specifically tested by us, but we do have users running in it, yes.
Okay. Pat has two questions. What about order entry integration?
Okay, that's the first one.
And
yes,
any provision for optional fields?
We do have optional fields as well. All that's going to be covered, though, in a subsequent session. The optional field functionality, or the custom, we call them custom fields, is very, very cool. Yes, we do have that. We're going to be looking at that in a later session, though.
Okay. And Etienne asks, is there a macro language?
No macros, no.
Okay. Let's see. Do you have to worry about data integrity issues with SAE before converting to SPM. So what's your practical advice there, Doug?
Say that one more time.
What is the issue with regard to data integrity before converting? I'm sure you're going to tell people to run the data integrity test on the SAE side before they do a data conversion. Isn't that true?
Sure. So what kind of preparation should you take beforehand?
Yeah, I think that's what was meant.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, from a preparation standpoint, in SAE, if you were going to bring it over to SPM, you would run the data integrity check. You'd run it with fixed minor errors selected, and then any of those errors that show up there, you're going to clear up any you can, and then let support know about any that you can't, because you really want to get that error-free before you run the conversion. That's true of anything, yeah. Yep.
Okay, and here's a question from Joe Moseri. So, can I have a customer in U.S. dollars and a home currency in Canadian dollars, and it'll work nicely with decimal places, so both currencies can have 5 decimal places? A customer.
You mean
MISys
supplier,
doesn't
I
know
think.
about customers, does it?
No, but I think what he's referring to is suppliers, and you're referring to the limitation where in ACTAC, supplier currency was restricted with, I believe it's 4. Yes, each of your currencies now in SPM can go up to 6 places, and you define them specifically by currency, so you can drive each one of those separately. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
However, that does
Chris
not
Shaw
change.
asks, will SPM run standalone?
Sure. Yeah. Meaning, could you
In
just
other
run
words,
SPM?
one of the choices, just show us right there if you can, one of the choices on the accounting integration. I thought of that because recently I had somebody ask me who made none, thinking it was an accounting system.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Can we transfer completed items directly from the MO into IC? I think you're going to cover that, aren't you?
Yeah, that's all going to be covered in an upcoming session. Yeah, but yes, you can. Same with order entry, IC. All that functionality is there and then some. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
We got
let's
time
try.
for more. How are we doing?
Let's couple more.
Is Crystal the reporting tool?
Yes, it is. We use Crystal for reporting. Reports have changed, though. They're different than SAE, but again, that's going to be another session. But yes, we do use Crystal.
Dana Stinson asks, is there serial lot tracking integration with ACTAC?
Yes, there is. Yep, it integrates in the same manner that it would from SAE. Yep.
Okay. Can we contract with us for customizations? I'm assuming that Joe is talking about customizations of reports.
Reports you can, yes. No custom programming, though. Yep.
You still do that, Doug, in your spare time.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions about recorded seminars. We are recording this, and we'll be posting it in the partner forum, partner portal of the website. So we'll announce that later on.
Yeah, and there's one other thing worth mentioning as well. For those of you who are going to, jump right into this and take a look, MISys SPM is not currently compatible. This current version is not currently compatible with 5.6. So keep that in mind. The next update will be, and we're efforting that as we speak. So just bear that in mind when you run your tests and things like that. So.
Okay. So let's see. A bunch of questions about recordings. Here's a question from Michael Grilly. Does SPM allow for multiple rates per currency code, much like ACTAC?
No, one rate. Well, that depends, I guess. What if you're referring to here? You have one rate.
Yeah, it's not by date. Right.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's more another session, but.
Is there any way of customizing the screens?
Sure, yeah. If what you're talking about, can you stretch and move the forms around? Sure.
No, I bet this person was talking about changing the forms and moving fields around.
Sure, yes, you can do that, and we'll look at that in a future version. But, yeah, you can drag forms around. and switch them around.
Should SAE version of MISys be removed after you convert to SPM? That's a good question.
That was, should SAE be removed?
Yeah, that's right. After I convert to SPM, should I remove SAE?
It would be entirely up to you. Can you have them both running at the same time? Sure, you absolutely can. But it won't hurt anything to keep one running while the other one is. That's really up to you.
All right. Can the number of decimal places in SPM equal 6 for U.S. dollars, but ACPAC be 2?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No problem.
That's not a problem.
Dave Simpson, he wants to know if it's compatible with Win 7.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Hope everybody's using Win 7. I call it Vista that actually works. Can you import currency codes, currency rates from ACPAC?
Well, the currency information can be brought in and synced up with ACPAC, but again, that's another session. So, yep.
Okay. How do you intend for remote access to be handled with SPM? Ken Adams asks.
Well, the key thing is that URL, okay? So when you say remote access, the base rule here is every client has to have visibility to this website right here, okay? If they can see that website, meaning you could go into Internet Explorer and plug the URL in that we use to log in, okay, this guy here. If I can copy this URL into a website and you get a list of the MISys controls, they are good to go. And so the key thing is making it so that they have visibility to that website. So you can use VPN to connect to the network and then hook up to that website. If you want to look at opening it up to the Internet, and that's something you're able to do, then sure. If you want to, put the proper security in place, then you could do it that way. But the key thing is they have to be able to see this website.
We should add that all the communication happens with HTTP, right?
That is correct. Yep.
So that it's firewall friendly.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we've gotten pretty much to the end of it.
Right.
Thanks very much, folks. There have been a number of questions of when you will receive an invitation to the next session, which is going to be on Friday afternoon. Only those people who have asked good questions will receive invitations to the next one. Just kidding.
Right.
Everyone will receive an invitation later this afternoon, and we hope to see you on Friday. And once more, recordings will be posted in the partner portal of our website. So, Doug, anything else to say?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for coming. Lots of good questions, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.